After reviewing the podium teams in last episode for the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, we're going to be looking at the best of the rest of the countries. We have USA, Slovakia, and much more coming up on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakash and joined by Sebastian High. We're both directors of scouting at Dobber Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the best of the rest of the countries that did not make the podium at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup. We've got a lot of standouts to go through today. We're going to start off with Team USA in our first segment. We're going to look at Slovakia's standouts in the second segment. And then in our third segment, we'll look at the best of the rest, so Finland, Germany, and Switzerland. Before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 at FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, as always, remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started here with Team USA standouts. Now, Team USA, as usual, did not bring their big stars to this tournament. So no James Hagens, no Logan Hensler, no LJ Mooney. Just kind of the kind of best of the rest there for USA, but it was still a decent team that made it to the bronze medal game. They lost, unfortunately, to Sweden, so they did not make the podium, but still had a decent tournament there. And we're going to start off with the big standout for me in this tournament, and it's Blake Fiddler. Size, handedness, all that good stuff. Start us off here, Sebastian.
For sure, Blake Fiddler is a hulking right shot defenseman, standing at 6'4" and 207 pounds already. He's young for the draft class, as a July 9th, 07 birthday, making me feel very old with that 07 date now entering the draft conversation. And he spent last season playing with the Edmonton Oil Kings in the WHL, where he logged 5 goals and 15 points through 63 games. But don't let those point totals distract you from the fact that this is a highly exciting player who is dominant defensively and physically, quite clearly based off of the frame, but his physical habits and mechanics are also very strong. But there's so much more to his game as well, whether it be the mobility, whether it be the underrated level of skill, the intelligence on both sides of the puck. There's so much to like here, and I know that he's a player that stood out for you in every single game that you watch of this Team USA. So please talk me through what your takeaways were from Blake Fiddler's game, and where do you think he's going to end up on draft day?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's the only player in this tournament that made me actually utter expletives at how good he was defending the rush. Like, he was just so good at matching footwork, at getting his long stick within kind of carrying lanes and disrupting pucks. Overall, he was incredibly difficult to get around, especially against the lower end teams. I mean, he was just so good at defending the rush and really made it a specialty in this tournament. But also, after disrupting those pucks, his ability to retrieve the puck, to spin off of pressure, to use his mobility to get up the ice. There were many circumstances where he carried the puck up the ice himself. At one point, he went between the legs on a defenseman coming off the right boards. So went between the legs to the middle and then stuffed the puck between the goalie's legs. So there's an underrated skill set there with Fiddler that I actually went back and watched some of his tape last year with the Edmonton Oil Kings, and I didn't see that coming at all. There was no indication in his draft -1 that he would have this level of skill. It feels like he's really developed over the summer and added a bunch of tools to his offensive skill set. Booming shot from the point, underrated hands, great puck carrier with a decent passing game as well. Let's say the passing is kind of the lower end of his offensive skill set, but the shooting and handling are definitely there with Fiddler. He's a son of Vernon Fiddler, who's a Dallas Stars legend, and he's developed incredibly well. The skill set offensively. He went from a player I had seen once or twice in passing last year by watching the Oil Kings when I was, catching tape of some other prospects there. He went from kind of a lower end player that I didn't even consider as kind of a top 64 prospect to being a top 10 pick, in my opinion, for the 2025 NHL draft. He's really good. One of the top defensemen from this class, and just overall just a really polished skill set. So I'm really excited to see what Blake Fiddler does this season with the Oil Kings. It's going to be really interesting. But let's move right on to his D partner, Edison Engel, the left shot defenseman of Team USA. And he was impressive as well. A lot more of a kind of he's a bit more undersized, definitely, than Blake Fiddler, but definitely has the skill set in order to break pucks out of his zone. He's got decent rush defending skills as well, really mobile. He's one of those kind of average-sized defensemen who rely on their skating and stick work a lot to win battles. He's going to need to kind of mold his game a tiny bit more to be a bit more physically capable as he moves up the ranks and plays pro. But there's a decent skill set to work with here with Edison Engel. Again, really mobile, good puck-moving defenseman. Takes care of plays on both sides of the ice, really poised, really composed, really calm. He needs to work on his passing game a tiny bit. His breakout passing, sometimes, he would miss his mark with no pressure on him, that kind of stuff. It's more about execution problems than mental problems. He's very much aware of which lanes he needs to hit. He's able to wait for secondary passing lanes and that kind of stuff, but it's just he's not executing as well as he could. So I think that part of his game kind of keeps him from being a first rounder or maybe even a second rounder for me. But overall, I was still impressed with his game. And finally, for another defenseman here for USA who really impressed me was Carter Murphy. He was an assistant captain in this tournament. He's an undersized puck-moving defenseman, very much in the mold of Lane Hudson. Same issues with Engel in terms of execution. Sometimes it was just it was missing passes outright with no pressure on him. But incredibly good at carrying the puck up the ice, deking his way into the offensive zone. There's a reason why he was USA's top power play quarterback. It's because of his understanding of offensive plays, his ability to access the offensive zone and start the power play that way. Really reliable when it comes to carrying the puck up the ice. Made very little mistakes. Sometimes with these defensemen, these undersized, kind of speedy carrying defensemen, you'll see them overuse their handling skill and kind of bobble pucks up or skate right into a stick and turn the puck over. I didn't really see that much from Carter Murphy in this tournament, but Murphy was obviously very limited physically and defensively, especially in his own zone. But yeah, overall, a great offensive defenseman with really exciting tools that you can build around. So he was another exciting player there. I do want to talk about Cooper Simpson as well, who was the top line winger for Team USA in this tournament. He played mainly on the left wing. The creativity with him was off the charts, right?
Absolutely. He was really good. And despite the actual production not jumping off the page at all with just a single goal in the 5 games that he played, I really liked what I saw from him. And I got a couple viewings of him last year as well when I was checking out Trevor Connolly. With the Tri-City Storm in the USHL, where Simpson played last season for 31 games and scored 7 goals and 13 points. But yeah, I fully agree. The level of skill was really exciting. I thought that there was a level of dynamism, and there were also a couple periods where I thought that at the pace was a massive strength. There were other periods where I thought it was a bit more lackluster, and there's a level of inconsistency there, which is to be expected at a tournament like the Hlinka, where you're having 17, 16-year-old players play, and it's the first big thing of the season after the summer break. But I agree with you. I was impressed by his play. I thought that he was a decent standout among the forwards for Team USA, despite not really getting on the score sheet all that much. But what aspects of his game were you more impressed by? Was it the tools or was it the brain?
It was definitely the tools. He's a really good handler. His ability to break defensive lines was fantastic. Him and his center, Matthew Lansing, were both really good at this. They were really good at catching defensemen with their feet planted and getting around them really easily. I thought Matthew Lansing as well had a fantastic tournament. He scored 2 goals in the bronze medal game. Wasn't enough to beat Sweden, but still played really well. His second goal especially was really interesting, where he kind of cut wide. He got the puck in the defensive zone, went end to end, and as he's closing down on the offensive zone, he kind of hooked the puck under the Swedish defenseman's stick. And the Swedish defenseman was Malte Voss, who we highlighted in last episode as being a really good defensive defenseman. He was still able to hook the puck under his stick and kind of skate around them and catch the puck behind him. So really interesting skill set there from Matthew Lansing as well. But those two mainly use their tools to be effective. I didn't really see much high-end processing from either of them. Certainly less from Cooper Simpson, but overall, both of them just showed a decent amount of tools. And I like Cooper Simpson's fit in Tri-City. They're really good at developing skilled offensive players, as we've clearly seen last year with Trevor Connolly and his dynamism and his level of skill. Simpson definitely doesn't have the brain offensively that Trevor Connolly has, but he certainly has that skill level, that foot speed, that intensity, that kind of stuff. So I'm a big fan. Let's move right on to Sam Spear, who was the third-line center for USA throughout this tournament. I thought he had a poor start to it, but by the end, he combined intensity, pace, foot speed, and skill really well, especially in terms of playmaking. He showed that he's able to hook passes under sticks to the middle. He's able to play give and goes, slip passes, area passes. He showed a lot of great passing skill as well. So I wanted to highlight him real quick. And lastly, I want to talk about Nicholas Sikora, who started off on the fourth line and ended up getting some shifts on the first and second lines due to his level of offensive refinement. This is a player who I did not expect this from. His offensive toolkit is really, really refined. I mean, he's able to curl and drag shots around defenders, around sticks. Passing-wise, same as Sam Spear, a really wide arsenal of passes and great pass selection as well. Slip passes, hook passes, area passes, the same kind of feeling there you have with Sam Spear. On top of being bigger, stronger, a much better shooter. So overall, I thought that he deserved his chances in the top six and was one of USA's standouts for me for sure. But that's our first segment done. We'll get into our second segment where we talk about Slovakia's standouts. They had a couple of really decent players, including a 15-year-old. We'll get into that in just a second, but just before, a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
I love sports. I love them so much that I just never want them to stop. But as the playoffs are now far in the rearview mirror in the NHL, and we have fewer and fewer games in any sport to get excited about now and during the summer, FanDuel still lets me to keep the sports going all summer long, whenever I want, wherever I am. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up every single customer with a boost or a bonus every single day. That's right. There's something for everyone daily all summer long. Whether you want to take your swings on golf or Major League Baseball, or maybe you're getting excited for the other sports starting up, coming up in the fall, the choice is yours with FanDuel, and you can just dream up bets whenever you're in the mood and get excited, because there's nothing more exciting than taking the shots that you believe in when it comes to the sporting world. So head on over to FanDuel.com and make the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll look at Slovakia's standouts in this tournament. And we're going to start off here with Jan Hovan, who was the first-line center for Slovakia and played really, really well. He's a decent-sized left-shot center and used his frame really well off the cycle to win battles, forechecked really well, was really defensively responsible as well, and won a bunch of face-offs. So overall, a great defensive game, defensive-leaning game, but also some decent production from him as well, as I believe he was the leading scorer for Slovakia. It's mainly because of that cycle dominance, that ability to move off the wall and get shots off. Great power play player as well, mainly manned the net front and kind of moved off to the half wall when he needed to. But yeah, overall, I really, really like Jan Hovan's tournament here, and he's setting himself up for a decent draft year season. He's going to be really good this year. I do want to move on to a 2026 NHL draft eligible that really stood out as well in Tobias Tomik. Tomik is a November birthday, I believe, November 07 birthday. So just old enough for the 2026 NHL draft. And he played really well, showed some dynamic skill in transition, had a really strong stick in transition where it was really hard to kind of poke the puck off of him. Really good kind of puck protection mechanics as well, and was consistently driving the middle and driving the net. So overall, just a great tournament from him. And yeah, I also want to talk about Michal Svrček, who was really, really good. He played on the first line with Hovan. Talk me through what you liked from his game overall and what impressed you from his tournament.
For sure. Svrček is a player that stood out to me for multiple reasons. I mean, the handling ability was something that really stood out, especially among his cohort on that Slovakian team. I thought that he was really the most dynamic puck handler in that lineup. He's a 5'10", 172-pound left shot centerman, and he's a player that's been developing over in Sweden. And I think that a lot of that style of play that you see from a lot of players developing in Sweden really bleeding into his game, and whether it be the mobility, the skating that is more refined, I think, than a lot of his other teammates in this tournament had, or just the, I guess, not middle-driven approach, but kind of like getting in from the periphery and finding like small little gaps to exploit rather than just pummeling down the middle, and which also really helps with his size. He's a bit undersized, not the most physical player in the world, but he's a player that can find those small little gaps and use his brain and his playmaking ability in his hands to solve complex problems. And he's a player that I thought was especially impressive on the man advantage when he had more space to work with, and definitely a player I'm going to keep my eye on this season in his development in the J20 with Brynäs IF.
Absolutely, yeah, he was really impressive in this tournament. But let's talk about that 15-year-old Timothy Kazda of the Slovak squad. Mainly played in the middle six for them, mostly on the third line, and showed a lot of dynamic skill. This is a player who, again, is 15 years old, and he's carrying pucks at a high end level. He put some effort on the back check and the forecheck. It was really intense as well. Create a lot of takeaways and turnovers for the opposing team, where he just kind of forced them into mistakes, forced them into lanes occupied by his teammates. Overall, I think he's going to be a player to look out for there for the 2027 NHL draft. God, I feel old. He's 10 years younger than me. That feels absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, overall, Caza was really, really impressive. Great skill level. Much more likely to handle the puck than try to play in a give and go, which is one thing that players usually develop with time. Again, he's 15, like give him some time. But overall, yeah, just a great, great tournament from Timothy Kazda as well. Um, and I,
Which was also especially impressive considering that the highest level he'd played before this Hlinka tournament was U15 AAA hockey in the US.
That's ridiculous. That feels all sorts of wrong. I'm really curious to see where he ends up this year. He's in the U.S. system. I didn't check which team he's affiliated to. I don't think that's been announced yet, has it?
I mean, he's been developing with Seacoast Performance Academy, but he's projected to play there this season with the U16 team. But there's no news just as of yet of what path exactly he's going to be taking after that, and which
Yeah.
organization has his rights.
For sure. And overall, I think Slovakia had options where they could have not gone with a 15-year-old, but he clearly convinced them and convinced me as well of his skill set. I don't think I see like a top 10 pick in 2027. 2027 is looking like a pretty decent class as well, but it's way too early. Time will tell with that. I can't break down in August of 2024 who's going to be drafted in July 2027. That's there's too much of a gap there. But we'll look at that when the time comes to kind of review that. But I really like Timothy Kaz's game overall. And lastly, I want to talk about pretty much the top pair defenseman for Slovakia throughout this tournament, Michal Kapos. He's a big right shot defenseman. Played some really decent minutes early on, especially against the higher end teams. Played a great game against Finland, especially. But we'll get into that in a second. But Finland did not have the best tournament. But overall, Michal Kapos was really, really good. I like the mobility. I like the breakout skill. I like the composure when he was being pressured by forwards on the forecheck. Pretty good on retrievals as well. I thought he could have done a bit better. Sometimes he was a bit kind of panicky with his back to the play. But as far as Slovak defensemen go, he was up there with the best of them. By the end, when they played kind of the final game against Germany, he ended up being on the second pair, but that second pair ended up being used a lot more than the first pair. So overall, I was really impressed with Michal Kabos's tournament. A player I think people should keep an eye on as the tournament goes on. Great player. I think that overall the defensive game was especially the big standout. He's really good at defending the rush, really aggressive in zone, a physical defenseman. In front of the net, behind the goal line, you name it. He was trucking players and having a lot of fun with it. So overall, I was pretty impressed with this tournament as well. But that's our second
One more
segment.
player
Yeah, go ahead.
One more player I wanted to ask you about, actually, because there's been a lot written about him in the last year for Team Slovakia, was Adam Nemec. How was he at this tournament? Was he just very quiet, or what was going on with his game?
He was good. I didn't think he was a main standout, but he played a decent game. He was actually at my hotel. I ran into him in the fitness room. He was getting some cardio reps in before the game, which is really funny. And funnily enough, at Chopper's Drug Mart, he was out there getting snacks or something. I don't remember. But yeah, just a really fun guy. Clearly an active player. He loves to get involved on both ends of the ice. But mostly, what really impressed me with him is the combination of handling skill and skating. He was able to get around defenders. He was able to cut inside defenders with quick inside dekes under an opponent's stick. He was able to exploit the defenseman's triangle. So the space between their stick blade and their two skates was really good at exploiting that space in transition. So a couple of decent kind of flashes of offensive skill, but I didn't feel like he was at his best in this tournament. I've seen some better games from Adam Yemis last year. So yeah, overall, mainly played in the middle six, mainly on a second line, but was kind of the passenger on that second line. He was able to carry pucks up the ice and get some dekes in, but not to the level of frequency that we've seen from him already. He's Simon Yemec's brother, so he's got some bloodlines already. And he's looking fairly good for the 2026 NHL draft, but it's a bit early to tell. But yeah, that's our second segment done. We'll get into our third here where we break down the best of the rest. We'll look at Finland's best players, Germany's best players, and Switzerland's best player. single. So we'll get into that in just a second, but just before, a quick word from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Alrighty, so let's close things off here with our final segment. We'll look at, first of all, Finland's best prospects in this best of the rest segment. For Finland, there were two main standouts, and that was about it. This was a really, really bad Finnish team. And speaking to scouts at the tournament, it's looking like 2026 is not going to be any much better. Next year's tournament doesn't look like it has any more quality than this one. Finland struggled hard in this tournament. I don't believe they won a single game, including their game against Germany. They lost that one. And just overall, highly defensive, but also highly
They
boring
beat
hockey.
Switzerland.
That's right. I mean, that's a low bar, let's be honest.
Yes,
but I mean,
it is.
overall, yeah, it was a pretty bad tournament for Finland there. But two standouts that stood out for us. First and foremost, Max Vestergaard, who's, I believe, a 2026 NHL draft eligible.
Indeed.
He looked fairly good in this tournament. He scored 2 goals, and overall showed a lot of intensity. He spent the entire tournament on the first line, and for me was the driving force on that first line. He was consistently driving play offensively, consistently working through lanes, kind of applying hard but also smart pressure on the forecheck, where he was forcing turnovers by kind of forcing defensemen into the wall and then kind of sealing off that wall with really good skating. Overall, offensively, I thought that he was, again, really intense, especially off the cycle. He was getting off the wall, he was getting shots off, he was retrieving them himself, kind of extending plays that way rather. And overall, I thought that Vestergaard was the kind of driving, like I said, the driving force for Finland in that tournament offensively. But they did have one defenseman that stood out for me, is Ville Kotajärvi, a left shot D who spent pretty much the entire tournament on the first line, on the first pair rather, and played some decent hockey. I mean, he wasn't the best defensively. He was getting overwhelmed, especially physically. But offensively, he was pushing the pace. He was getting up the ice. He was joining the play as a fourth forward. Kotajärvi was pretty good in this tournament, and I thought that, even though he could have done more defensively, gotten more involved, he was just skating a bit more on the defensive side of things. He played well enough offensively that I thought that he deserved a mention in this. And again, Finland did not have a great tournament. So I take these standouts with a bit of a grain of salt. Even their top scorer in this tournament, Atejoki, does not make this cut because he did not impress me. He had 5 points in 4 games, and for me was not a good player. He was playing on the second line for Finland, and I think that was just by default of just not having better options. He's a confident stick handler, but outside of that, just did not provide enough skill for me. But let's talk about the German squad, Sebastian, as a person of German origin. Talk me through the two big standouts here for Germany in this tournament.
For sure. I mean, the biggest name on this German team is David Lewandowski, who's a player who impressed a lot as a D-1 last year. He's a 6'1", 172-pound left shot forward. He can play down the middle. He can play on the wing. Probably a winger in terms of projection, in my opinion. And he spent last season playing in the German 3rd Pro Division as well as the U20 League, and he played very well in both. But he'll be put to the test this upcoming season playing in the DEL, which will be a massive leap in competition for him, and we'll see how he fares there. But I liked his performance at this tournament. I thought that he was the most intelligent, or one of the most intelligent players in that German lineup. He was consistently making pretty sound decisions, and while the level of skill and flair does not compete with the other top prospects at this tournament by any means, I still thought that he was able to create things for his team when he was on the ice. But when you're playing for Team Germany at a tournament like the Hlinka, you're going to be chasing the game most of the time, which was the case for sure this year as well. But yeah. I also thought that Carlos Hendel was pretty impressive from the blue line for Germany. 6'1", 168-pound right shot defenseman. Pretty solid going in both directions. Thought he made decent decisions with the puck on his stick, but nothing that like blew me away either. I don't think that we're talking about a German draft class with any first rounders this year, but definitely some names that are notable, and probably more notable than we saw last year. Especially, there really wasn't much talent coming out of Germany in that 2024 class. But what was your takeaway here? Because there were a couple standouts here, right, with Lewandowski and with Hendel, but also the Griva twins were quite decent at this tournament.
Absolutely. I'll get into those two in just a second, but just to close things off on Carlos Hendel, talking to scouts at this tournament, he might be a first rounder. Some teams really, really, really liked him.
That's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. great stick handler from the blue line, great shot
Yeah.
selection, especially really poised, really calm. The size holds him back. He definitely needs to fill out his frame, but he looked really, really good in this tournament.
Yeah.
He was for me Germany's best player pretty much on every night. And I'm a fan of David Lewandowski as well, so that gives you an idea. I also want to talk about Dustin Wilhoft, who was pretty much their either top line or second line winger most games. I really liked his pace and transition, his ability to carry pucks up the ice. I loved his shot in motion as well. He was able to release a shot during, through his stick handling and in the middle of crossovers and that kind of stuff. But he was mainly a passer. He was really good at using his teammates as either decoys or using them as opportunities to get behind defenders by playing give and goes. So really polished game, surprisingly, for a player of Wilhoff's stature. He's not the biggest guy. So I really liked this game overall. But let's talk about the Griva twins. They led Germany in scoring in this tournament, both, I believe, with 4 points. And played really well. I mean, they played on the fourth line most of the time, but Germany was really good at rotating their lines equally. So I don't think the Griva twins got any less than 2 minutes less than the top line or something like that. They played really good minutes and played really well with them. And you can see the chemistry between those two. And it's always the case when it comes to twins playing on the same line. They kind of know where each other are. They find each other all over the ice. I don't think either one of them gets drafted, especially not this year. But I think moving forward, you might see them kind of force their way into a decent draft +1 season to get drafted then or something like that. But yeah, both of them were pretty impressive with their ability to find each other all over the ice. And let's close things off here with our final pick here. And this is pretty much the only standout I could name for you here for
Yes.
Switzerland. They had a difficult tournament as usual, but Florian Schenk was pretty good for Switzerland. He was he was tied for top of their scoring list, I believe, with 2 points. So it gives you an idea of how difficult this tournament was for Switzerland. But overall, I thought that Schenk used his teammates really well in transition. He forced play up the ice. He's a decently sized center. Played some decent games for them in that tournament. But again, Switzerland was a really tough watch, and it's really difficult to watch players and figure out where they stand and how good they are when they're getting blown up for 13 goals in a game. Like it's a difficult watch. So he's a player I think that we'll both bookmark and keep an eye on in terms of his league play to see where he stands. So yeah, it was a difficult tournament overall for Switzerland. I thought that obviously it's difficult to gauge their tournament when they're playing way above their level of competition. But Schenk was really interesting. 6'3", 200 pounds. He's going to be playing in the Q next year with the St. John Sea Dogs. So he'll be right in my neck of the woods, and I'll keep a close eye on him as the year goes on. But I think his league play is going to be a lot more indicative of what he can do. It's difficult to scout these players when they're playing so much higher than what they're capable of and getting blown up for 13 goals. It's difficult to get a gauge on what they can do. So I think his league play is going to be a lot more interesting, and I think he's a player we're both going to bookmark and keep an eye on as the season goes on, right?
For sure. It's a very interesting profile. And I think I caught one full Switzerland game at this tournament. He was really, as you said, the one player that for me was a positive standout in some regard. And it wasn't that he was playing great shifts every single shift, but there were decent flashes, and he uses his size really well. I think that his ability to use his body and his strength and his overall physical habits will serve him really well in a league like the QMJHL, and will probably improve his chances of being drafted relative to playing U20 hockey in Switzerland.
Absolutely. But that's our episode done. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, as always, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments down below what you think of the episode, who you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, as usual, make sure to leave us a rate and review. And please make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our future shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of August. This has been Hattie Kalikesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.